She said, "It's not cheating, it's exploring my sexuality." I replied, "I support your journey of exploration." I then began my own journey by exploring what life was like without her. She panicked when my exploration ended with a new apartment and her number blocked. I, 32M, discovered my wife's exploration on a random Tuesday evening when she sat me down with that look people get when they're about to destroy your world, but somehow convinced themselves they're being brave. She had been acting strange for 3 weeks, coming home later than usual, phone angled away during texts, extra attention to her appearance before girls' nights that seemed to multiply weekly. I noticed but said nothing, hoping my paranoia was just that. The conversation started calmly enough. She needed to talk about us, about her feelings, about something she'd been processing. I sat across from her at our kitchen table, the same one where we'd eaten breakfast that morning like everything was normal, and watched her carefully construct her confession. She told me she had been seeing someone. Not quite dating, she clarified, but exploring a connection that made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about me, she insisted. It was about her journey of self-discovery, about not wanting to reach 40 and wonder what else was out there. She called it exploring her sexuality, her needs, her authentic self. The kicker was her expectation. She wanted to stay married while continuing this exploration. She loved our life together, our home, the stability we'd built. But she also needed this freedom to grow. She had read articles about ethical non-monogamy and thought we could make it work if I was willing to evolve with her. I sat there processing her words, watching her face switch between guilt and defiance, hope and fear. She actually believed I might agree to this arrangement, that I would smile and nod while she had her adventure and came home to the safety net I provided. Something cold settled in my chest during that conversation. Not rage, not yet. Something quieter and more permanent. I looked at the woman I'd been married to for 6 years and realized I was looking at a stranger who had already left our marriage weeks ago, but wanted to keep me around as insurance. I told her I understood, that I supported her journey of exploration completely. Her face lit up with relief and surprise, thinking she'd somehow pulled off the impossible. Then I continued. I said I thought it was important we both had the freedom to explore, to discover what life had to offer outside the constraints of what we'd built together. The relief on her face flickered. She asked what I meant. I explained calmly that I would be exploring too. Exploring what my life looked like without someone who had already checked out of our marriage while pretending to honor it. Exploring whether I was happier investing my energy in someone who didn't need to audition replacements while keeping me on standby. She backtracked immediately. That wasn't what she meant. She wasn't leaving me. This was different. I was being dramatic and not listening to what she was really saying. I asked her one question. If the situation was reversed, if I came home and told her I'd been seeing someone else for 3 weeks, but wanted to stay married while I figured out my feelings, would she be supportive? The silence that followed gave me my answer. I stood up from the table and told her I needed time to think. She tried to follow me, tried to restart the conversation, but I walked out of the house and drove aimlessly for 2 hours. My phone buzzed repeatedly with her texts explaining, justifying, apologizing in ways that somehow still centered her feelings. By the time I returned home that night, my decision was made. I slept in the guest room, ignoring her attempts to talk through the closed door. In the morning, I contacted a divorce attorney. The next 2 weeks moved faster than she expected. I worked remotely, which gave me flexibility to apartment hunt during lunch breaks. I found a place across town, a smaller space that felt like breathing room rather than a loss. I set up utilities, arranged for movers, and methodically separated 6 years of shared life into his and hers. She oscillated between panic and anger during this time. One moment she was crying, asking why I was throwing away our marriage over one mistake. The next she was defensive, saying I was being controlling and punishing her for being honest instead of just cheating behind my back like most people. I remained calm through all of it. That coldness from the first night had settled into a kind of clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. She tried different strategies. She ended things with the other person, she claimed. She wanted to do marriage counseling. She promised it would never happen again. She loved me and had made a terrible mistake in how she handled her feelings. I asked her why she hadn't come to me before starting something with someone else if she was struggling in our marriage. Why counseling and honest communication weren't options before she gave herself permission to explore elsewhere. She had no good answer. Just more justifications about how it happened gradually, how she didn't plan it, how complicated feelings were. I noticed she never actually apologized for the betrayal itself, only for how it made me feel. The day I moved out, she watched the movers load furniture with tears streaming down her face. She begged me not to do this, said we could fix it if I just gave her a chance. I told her she'd already had her chance and had chosen to spend it with someone else. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. The apartment felt empty that first night, but it was a clean emptiness, not the hollow feeling of being with someone who had already left. I ordered takeout, set up my gaming console, and slept better than I had in weeks. She called repeatedly. I answered the first few times, listening to her cycle through the same arguments. When it became clear these conversations went nowhere, I told her all communication needed to go through my attorney. She was furious, accusing me of being cold and unfeeling, of giving up on us too easily. I reminded her that she gave up first. I was just finishing what she started. 2 days after the move, I blocked her number. Also her email, her social media, every avenue she'd been using to send me essays about our relationship and her regrets. My attorney would handle the divorce proceedings. There was no reason for us to stay in contact. That's when the real panic set in. Update 1. I learned about her reaction through mutual friends. Apparently blocking her had triggered something. She showed up at my office building, waiting in the lobby until security escorted her out when she refused to leave. She contacted my parents, my brother, telling them I was being unreasonable and asking them to intervene. My mom called me that evening. She had been sympathetic to my situation from the start, but she was worried about my ex's behavior. I told her I was fine, that I didn't want her caught in the middle, and that this would blow over once the divorce was finalized. But it didn't blow over. My ex started posting cryptic messages on social media about abandonment and betrayal. She never named me, but our shared circle knew who she meant. Some people reached out asking what happened. I kept my responses brief. We were getting divorced, and I preferred to keep it private. Her version of events, filtered through mutual acquaintances, painted me as someone who left without warning over a minor disagreement, who refused to work on the marriage, who was punishing her for being vulnerable. The gaslighting was almost impressive. I had one friend, someone I'd known since college, who reached out with genuine concern. He'd heard her side and wanted to hear mine. I gave him the basics. She had been involved with someone else, wanted an open marriage retroactively, and I chose to leave rather than accept that arrangement. He was quiet for a long moment, then told me he was sorry. That made sense of her desperate behavior. Word spread after that. The narrative shifted. Some mutual friends who had been distant became supportive. Others, particularly her closer friends, doubled down on defending her choices and criticizing my reaction. I let them. Their opinions didn't change my circumstances. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects, took on additional responsibilities, stayed late. My boss noticed the increased dedication and the fact that I seemed more focused than I'd been in months. I got assigned to a major client pitch, something I'd been working toward for over a year. The pitch went well. We landed the account. My boss took me out for drinks afterward to celebrate, and for the first time since the separation, I felt something other than that cold clarity. I felt proud, accomplished, like I was building something that belonged only to me. Around week 4, my ex tried a new approach. She sent a letter to my apartment. Actual physical mail, which surprised me. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. She wrote about how she'd been in therapy, how she was working on herself, how she understood now what she'd done wrong. She asked for one conversation, one chance to apologize properly and get closure. She promised to respect whatever boundaries I set afterward. I read the letter twice, looking for sincerity beneath the words. Maybe some of it was genuine. Maybe therapy was helping her understand the damage she'd caused. But the letter also had that familiar undercurrent of manipulation, the subtle implication that I owed her this conversation. That closure was something she deserved from me. I didn't respond. 3 days later, she showed up at my apartment building. I was coming home from the gym when I saw her sitting in her car in the parking lot. She got out when she saw me, calling my name as I walked toward the entrance. I kept walking. She followed, asking me to please just give her 5 minutes. I stopped at the door and turned to face her. I told her she needed to leave, that this was harassment, and if it continued, I would file a restraining order. Her face crumpled. She looked smaller somehow, defeated in a way I hadn't seen before. She asked why I was being so cruel, why I wouldn't even let her apologize. I told her she was already apologizing. In the letter, in the phone calls before I blocked her, in the messages through friends. What she actually wanted wasn't to apologize, but to negotiate. To find some angle that would let her back into my life in whatever capacity I might allow. And I wasn't interested in any of it. She stood there staring at me, tears running down her face, and I felt nothing. That should have bothered me more than it did. 6 years with someone should leave more than this empty indifference. But she'd killed whatever I felt for her the moment she asked me to accept her betrayal as personal growth. I went inside and called my attorney. We discussed the restraining order option, but he suggested waiting to see if she escalated further. Documentation was important. I started keeping records of every attempt at contact, every mutual friend who passed along messages, every social media post that referenced our situation. Update 2. The divorce papers were served at week 6. My attorney said her response would tell us a lot about how contentious this would become. We'd been married for 6 years with no kids, and I wasn't asking for anything beyond my personal belongings and half the savings. The house was in her name from before the marriage, so that was clean. It should have been straightforward. Her attorney responded with demands. She wanted spousal support. She argued that she'd supported me through grad school, which was technically true, and that entitled her to compensation now that I was established in my career. Never mind that I'd been the primary earner for the past 3 years while she worked part-time. My attorney assured me these demands were negotiating tactics. We countered. The process dragged out. During this time, I started dating again. Not seriously, just casual meetups through apps. Dinner with someone from work's sister. Coffee with a woman I met at the gym. Nothing substantial, but it felt like reclaiming something that had been frozen. One date turned into several. She was a marketing consultant, recently relocated to the city, with no connection to my social circles or the drama of my failing marriage. She knew I was going through a divorce, and she was fine keeping things casual while that resolved. We had fun together. Simple, uncomplicated fun. Movies and museums and conversations that didn't require excavating buried resentments. She made me laugh. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed laughing. Around month 3, one of my ex's friends saw us at a restaurant. By the next day, my ex knew I was seeing someone. The reaction was nuclear. She called my attorney, furious that I'd moved on so quickly. How could I be dating when our marriage wasn't even officially over? Didn't I care about what we'd built together? This proved I'd never loved her, that I was the one who had emotionally checked out, that everything was actually my fault. My attorney was amused. He told her lawyer that what I did socially during our separation was none of her concern, and if she continued harassing me through legal channels about non-legal matters, we'd be discussing sanctions. But she found other outlets. The social media posts became more pointed. Stories about narcissists who discard people. Quotes about emotional abuse and men who can't handle strong women. Vague threats about telling the real story about our marriage. I didn't respond to any of it. Didn't even look at her accounts. Friends would occasionally inform me about particularly unhinged posts, worried about what she might do, but I maintained my silence. The woman I was seeing asked about it once. She'd seen some of the posts through mutual connections. I gave her the basic facts without editorializing. That my ex had wanted to open the marriage after already starting something with someone else, that I'd chosen divorce instead, and that she was struggling with the consequences of her choices. My date nodded thoughtfully. She said she'd dealt with something similar in a past relationship, understood how complicated the emotions were, and that she respected how I'd handled it. We continued seeing each other. By month 4, the divorce was nearly finalized. We'd reached a settlement that neither side loved, but both could live with. I'd agreed to a small one-time payment to close out negotiations, far less than she'd initially demanded, but enough for her to feel she'd won something. My attorney scheduled the final hearing. It would be over soon. The night before the hearing, my ex tried one last time. She called my parents' house, knowing I'd blocked her everywhere else. My dad answered. She told him she was scared, that she'd made mistakes but didn't deserve to lose everything, that I was being vindictive and refusing to forgive her like a marriage should allow. My dad, who had remained mostly quiet during the entire process, apparently told her that forgiveness didn't mean accepting mistreatment, that I had every right to decide what I would tolerate in my life, and that she needed to sign the papers and let me move forward. She hung up on him. The hearing was brief and procedural. We sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, didn't make eye contact, and answered the judge's questions. The dissolution was granted. 6 years of marriage ended in 20 minutes. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in half a year. It was done. Legally, officially, completely done. She tried to approach me in the hallway. I kept walking to my attorney's side, and he physically positioned himself between us. She called my name once, but I didn't turn around. That was the last time I saw her in person. Update 3. 3 months post-divorce, my life had settled into something unrecognizable from the marriage. The woman I'd been casually seeing had become less casual. We'd had conversations about what we both wanted, agreed we enjoyed each other's company, and decided to see where things went without pressure. She was different from my ex in fundamental ways. Direct communication instead of passive expectations. Actual partnership instead of scorekeeping. Independence instead of codependency. It wasn't love yet, but it was healthy, and that felt revolutionary. Work continued going well. The major account I'd helped land led to a promotion. My boss said I'd shown real leadership during a difficult personal time, and the company wanted to invest in my growth. The raise was substantial. I bought new furniture for the apartment. Not expensive stuff, but pieces I'd chosen rather than inherited from a shared life. Every item felt like a small declaration of independence. My ex's social media eventually went quiet about me. She'd moved on to posting about self-love and healing journeys, which felt ironic, but at least meant she was processing things. Through the grapevine, I heard she'd moved to a different city for a fresh start. I hoped that worked out for her genuinely. Not because I cared about her happiness specifically, but because I wanted her to find whatever it was she'd been searching for and stop trying to make it my problem. Some mutual friends reached out to rebuild connections now that the drama had settled. Others remained distant, having chosen sides. I was fine with both outcomes. The people who mattered had stuck around. My brother asked me once if I regretted how I'd handled everything. If I wished I'd tried harder to save the marriage. I told him no. That she'd shown me exactly who she was when she asked me to accept betrayal as growth. That everything afterward was just me believing her the first time. He nodded and changed the subject. We talked about his kids, about the upcoming holidays, about normal life things that didn't involve dissecting my failed marriage. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into her at a coffee shop. Pure coincidence in a city large enough that it shouldn't happen, but there she was, waiting for her order while I stood in line. She saw me first. I watched recognition cross her face, followed by a complicated mix of emotions I didn't try to interpret. She approached tentatively, asked if we could talk. I told her I didn't think that was a good idea. She pressed, said she'd done a lot of therapy and wanted to apologize without any agenda, just to acknowledge the hurt she'd caused. Part of me was curious what 6 months and professional help had done for her perspective. But the larger part remembered the exhaustion of those conversations, the circular logic, the way she'd made her choices my responsibility. I told her I appreciated the thought, but I'd already moved on, that I hoped she was doing well and that therapy was helping, but I didn't need her apology. I wished her the best and went to place my order. She stood there for a moment, then left before her order was called. I felt a small pang of something watching her go, not regret or longing, maybe just the echo of having cared about someone once. But it passed quickly, replaced by relief that I'd held my boundary. The woman I was dating picked me up after. We were going to check out a new art exhibit downtown. I told her about the encounter in broad strokes. She asked if I was okay. I realized I was. Looking back now, almost a year removed from that Tuesday evening when my ex announced her exploration, the thing that strikes me most is how much I'd already lost before I even decided to leave. The marriage had ended the moment she chose someone else while still sleeping in our bed. I'd just been the one willing to acknowledge it. She'd wanted me to be a safety net while she explored her options. Instead, I explored what life looked like when I stopped accepting less than I deserved. When I stopped negotiating with someone who'd already left the table. The apartment isn't empty anymore. It's full of choices I made, life I built, future I'm creating. Sometimes the woman I'm seeing stays over. Sometimes I cook dinner alone and enjoy the silence. Both feel like freedom. My ex wanted to explore her sexuality, her needs, her authentic self. I supported that journey by exploring mine, which led away from someone who thought love meant I'd wait around while she figured out if I was still her best option. She panicked when my exploration ended with a new life she wasn't part of. But that panic was never my responsibility to manage. I'd learned that the hard way, and the lesson stuck. People sometimes ask if I'm bitter. I'm not. Bitter would mean I was still carrying it around, letting it poison new experiences. Instead, I'm grateful. Grateful she showed me her priorities clearly enough that I could make an informed choice. Grateful I had the spine to walk away instead of accepting crumbs. Grateful that exploring life without her led me to a version of myself I actually liked. She wanted exploration. I gave us both that gift. She just didn't like where my exploration took me, and that was no longer my concern. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.